This video features both a compilation of a few shorts I made showing off changes and Easter eggs in Metal Gear Solid Delta, and corrections and brand new stuff I found but couldn't fit in a YouTube short. The shorts are converted to widescreen HD for better viewing experience on computer and TVs. As always, hope you guys enjoy. Before you skip to the juicier parts of this video, the reason why I'm starting with miscellaneous fun facts is not only to get them over without the gate, but also because a few of them will come into play later in this video. For now, let's start with, well, the start screen. Normally in Delta, you get the newly stylized start screen that changes in scenery as you progress through the game. But if you play in Legacy style and save your game, when you return to the title screen or start a new session, the title screen will be a remastered version of the one in the original PS2 version. You even get the same controls as the original, where you can change the color scheme, background pattern, layers, and animation speed by using L3, R3, and all the shoulder buttons. You can, of course, do the same in Delta's new title screen, but the effects are slightly different, like toggling back and forth through filters, stopping the camera from moving, speeding up the camera, zooming in, and moving the camera while fully zoomed in. And speaking of the new title screen, if you want to return to that version, simply open or start a new file in New Style and then save your game. Another fun fact, you know the sexy model posters you can find throughout the game? They've all been replaced with new ones in Delta, but not with new models. They're actually the same ones, just older. 21 years older. In an interview with Famitsu, the devs decided to contact the models to have them send the most recent photos of themselves to be used in Delta as an emotional gut punch to players to see how much has changed since playing the PS2 original 2 decades ago. Some are still modeling and flaunting their bodies, showing that they still got it after all these years, while others recently started families of their own. Of course, if you don't want to be reminded of the unstoppable march of time that comes for us all, worry not, because if you play in Delta's Legacy style, the posters will revert back to their 2004 versions. Here's a comparison of every poster I could find. While we're on the topic of posters, let's talk about the minor ones that are more or less just background set dressing. Some of the ones you can find in the original were actually redrawn for Delta. However, the more racy posters were replaced with random, bland images, usually of nature, in comparison. It's unknown why only the sensual ones were removed when the real-life model posters were left intact. Even if you play in Legacy style, the posters do not change. If they were redrawn or upscaled in New Style, they stay that way in Legacy style, and if they were replaced in New Style, they also stay replaced in Legacy. Moving on, let's talk about the magazines you can find in-game. No, not those ones. We'll get to them later. Specifically, the ones that feature real-life magazine brands filled with MGS3 promotional material. Unlike the sexy model posters, the magazine designs stay the same no matter which style you play in. Instead, they change based on the region you select in the main menu. That's because in the OG version, some magazine brands you can find are exclusive to where you bought the game. And, as you can see in this comparison here, they do match the OG versions of their region, if you don't count the new ones promoting MGS games that didn't exist yet, like these ones here. Now here's where things get a little weird. Since some magazines featured in the OG version went out of business, Konami didn't have modern issues to replace their cover art with. They also wouldn't be able to get higher definition versions of the old copies for the same reason. So while only a few magazines got the upscale treatment, others were replaced with different magazines, like the ones I showed earlier, and the rest were kept the same, low resolution and all, making the texture quality consistency a bit all over the place. Interestingly, if you open most of the magazines, even the newly replaced ones, you'll find their pages all still use the old super blurry textures from the OG version. With that out of the way, let's talk about the other type of magazine you can find in-game. The one I'm sure you're more excited to hear about. The pornographic magazine has a different cover art and model depending on the version you played. Here's how it looks in the OG Snake Eater version. And this is how it looks in the Subsistence version. As a quick side note, their 3D model in the pause menu's model viewer and the 3D model that floats in the air to pick up in-game are not the same. You can tell because the one you can pick up has a blank back cover, whereas the one in the pause menu obviously doesn't. Just a weird thing I noticed I just had to point out. Getting back on topic, in Delta, however, the porn mags only changes if you play in Legacy style or New style. In New style, the magazine gets a new cover art and model pictures exclusive to Delta, while in Legacy style, it's an upscaled version of the OG Subsistence version of the magazine. This means the only way to see this specific magazine is to play the OG Snake Eater version. While we're on the topic of upscaled textures, let's talk about Calorie Mates, one of the best food items in the game. In Delta, its textures are high quality enough to be able to read the text on the box, which technically wouldn't be the first time, but I'll get to that later. They even added text on its side showing the flavor name, which also wouldn't be the first time either, another thing I'll get to later. As you can see on the box, it's cheese flavored, which is fitting because that's the first flavor the product debuted with in real life in 1983. For now, let's ignore the fact that a product appears in a game that takes place in 1964, nearly 20 years before it's supposed to exist. When we compare it to the OG version, the text is super blurry front and back, and the item doesn't mention any flavor names on the side. It simply has the Calorie Mate logo colored in red. We can assume it's their 1993 chocolate flavor due to the logo's color, which matches its real-life counterpart. Quick editing note, while recording footage for a different section of this video, I found out by pure accident that if you play Delta in Legacy style and look at the Calorie Mate item again, it'll revert back to its red chocolate flavor branding as in the OG version. But unlike the OG version, its design properly matches its real-life counterpart. Editing note over. Getting back on topic, in the MGS HD collection however, the Calorie Mate design was changed. Not only is the small text on the front and back of the box a bit more readable, the logo's bright pink and the box has a flavor written on its back. Maple. The design change was probably done because it was the newest flavor at the time, debuting a few years prior to the HD collection's release date, hence the new in the top left corner of the box. As a quick note, while researching for this video, I came across a Metal Gear Solid wiki page claiming the Calorie Mate was changed once again to a different vanilla flavor in the MGS Master Collection. However, the wiki provides no sources like videos or pictures, and when playing it for myself to get footage, the design is still maple flavored like the HD collection. In fact, when booting up MGS3 in the Master Collection, you can clearly see it's just using the 2011 HD collection version, as shown on the title screen. Even the 3DS version features the maple flavor, so I have no idea where the wiki page came up with that claim. Now let's move on to the main event and talk about the bigger fun facts you guys are here for. Although Metal Gear Solid Delta reuses all voice lines from the original MGS3, the devs still made a few changes. Check out this conversation Snake has with Paramedic about Godzilla. First the OG version, then the remake. I'll highlight the words to pay attention to.
Japan.
Really? That's too bad.
Well, if you wait 40 years, you might be able to see it in America too.
Why's that?
2004 will be Godzilla's 50th birthday.
You think they're still going to be making Godzilla movies then?
Of course! Everybody loves Godzilla.
That's too bad.
If you wait 40 years, you might be able to see it in America too. It might even win awards all across the globe in 60 years.
Why's that?
2024 will be Godzilla's 70th birthday.
You think they're still going to be making Godzilla movies then?
Of course! Everybody loves Godzilla.
You sure know a lot about movies.
In my original video, I left it at that. However, upon further research, if you play Delta in Legacy style instead of the New style, Paramedic's radio call will use the original PS2 audio instead of the remake's re-recording.
2004 will be Godzilla's 50th birthday. 2024 will be Godzilla's 70th birthday.
And now you know. Speaking of original PS2 lines, listen to this one by Volgan.
Divided up and laundered through banks all over the world. Switzerland, Australia, and Hong Kong.
Did you know it's actually a mistranslation? He was actually supposed to say Austria, not Australia. But when the script got translated to English, the localizers either mistranslated or misspelled the country. This line persisted in all versions of MGS3 until the Delta remake decided to finally fix the 20-year-old typo. Although Delta brought back a few voice actors from the original to either redo or voice new lines, Volgan's VA was not one of them. And once you think about it, it kinda makes sense why. Volgan's VA is a unionized voice actor with about 4 decades of experience in countless roles big and small. Adding on to the fact he's reprising an old role of an extremely popular game made by a AAA studio will mean he's not gonna be cheap. Paying a guy several hundreds or most likely thousands of dollars per hour just to redo a single line to fix one word due to a localizer's screw up decades ago would be absolutely insane. So instead, they chopped up his line in editing to make it sound more like Austria. Listen for yourself, I'll play them back to back. First the OG version, then the remake.
Money was divided up and laundered through banks all over the world. Switzerland, Australia, and Hong Kong over the world. Switzerland, Australia, and Hong Kong.
This isn't the only chop job done in Delta's dialogue. At the start of the game, Major Zero teaches you how to play, but since the control scheme, and especially the UI, changed dramatically, you would need new voice lines to accommodate this. This actually has been done before. In the 2012 Nintendo 3DS version of MGS3, Zero's voice actor reprised his role to do new lines for the 3DS's control scheme and menu.
The survival viewer, choose Weapon from the backpack. Your available weapons will be displayed in a window in the upper left. From that list, choose the weapon you want to equip and press the Enter button. To equip a weapon, it's necessary to take it out of your backpack. In the survival viewer, choose Weapon from the backpack. The weapons you're currently holding will be displayed on the touchscreen. Choose the weapon you want to swap out, then press the Enter button.
However, this was not done for the Delta version. Instead, Zero's lines were taken and chopped up in such a way to sound like this.
Your available weapons will be displayed in a list on the screen.
Considering he never said the word screen in the original version, the devs most likely just cut out a clip of him saying it from this codec call.
Go to Uniform on the camouflage screen and choose...
Or from him saying scream-ing in this early game cutscene.
Sokolov kept on screaming, "Save."
While we're on the subject of cutting things out, let's get into the next topic of this video. Although at the start of the game Konami said all content from the OG version of MGS3 will be untouched, there's a few instances of what I'll call softened language being used in some of Delta's re-recorded codec calls. On top of that, there are lines that are cut out altogether. Here's Sigint talking to Snake about turds. First the OG version, then the remake. I'll highlight the differences.
You ever saw. Like, whenever it launches one of its turd missiles, whatever it hits, people, trees, buildings, turns into shit. My hometown, everything in that turd's path turned into shit.
That's pretty sick, man.
Good, then let's get down to business. You see, Snake, people are just sacks of shit and they're full of holes. Fill them up with water and it's gotta come out from somewhere. Okay, maybe that was a bad example. Whatever it hits, people, trees, buildings, turns into crap. My hometown, everything in that turd's path turned into crap.
That's pretty sick, man.
Good, then let's get down to business. You see, Snake, people are just turd sacks and they're full of holes. Fill them up with water and it's gotta come out from somewhere. Okay, maybe that was a bad example.
Now here's one with Snake and Eva where she mistakenly thinks Snake's trying to call her fat, overweight. I'll highlight the lines that were cut.
By the way, Snake, do you have a calorie mate?
Yeah. Are you on a diet?
What did you say?
Calorie Mate is supposed to be really good for losing weight.
Are you saying I'm fat?
No.
Be careful with what you say. So, is it true?
Is what true?
That it's good for losing weight.
Yeah. Calorie Mate provides a nutritionally balanced source of energy, and it makes counting calories easy. That's what's supposed to make it good for dieting.
Oh, I see. I'm sure there are some geisha out there using Calorie Mate for diets, but I doubt all of them are using it. By the way, Snake, do you have a Calorie Mate?
Yeah. Are you on a diet?
What did you say?
Calorie Mate provides a nutritionally balanced source of energy, and it makes counting calories easy.
Are you saying I'm overweight?
No.
Be careful what you say. So, is it true?
Is what true?
That it's also useful for controlling your calorie intake.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I'm sure there are some geisha out there using Calorie Mate to control their calories, but I doubt all of them are using it.
Strangely, unlike the Godzilla call I spoke about earlier where you get the original dialogue if you play in Legacy style, the same cannot be said here. If you play in Legacy style and call Sigint, you'll still get the changed dialogue as in new style. I tried checking if Eva's dialogue also uses its new lines in Legacy style, but no matter how many times I called her, I couldn't get her conversation to activate. I tried in different places and times across hours of recording sessions, so I don't know if the dialogue was removed in Legacy style. If anyone can get her Calorie Mate codec call to activate in Legacy style, let me know in the comments, and also let me know if she says her OG lines or still uses the new ones. What do you think about these changes? Is this the start of a slippery slope of censorship in gaming, and a sign of things to come in future Konami games? Or is it all just a massive reach and it's not really that deep? You decide. While we're still on the topic of censorship, let's finish out the video with something similar to censorship, but not quite when you investigate further. It all started on Twitter, the week of the game's release. A clip of Eva seductively crawling towards Snake in a cave was posted onto the site. And that's where the chaos began. People immediately began accusing Konami of censorship and swearing not to buy the game because of this scene. But what's so bad about it? I'll play the OG version of this scene first, then the Delta version. Did you see it? Watch it again side by side. See if you notice it now. That's right, Eva's breasts slightly jiggle in the OG version, while they don't in the Delta version. This was the start of what I'll call the Jigglegate scandal. Is this censorship? Maybe, but before you come to that conclusion, consider a small fact that has to do with game physics and cutscenes. I'm sure most of you know by now that in cutscenes, specifically talking about in-game cutscenes, you'll see why in a minute, characters typically don't animate when they're off-screen. When a scene or camera angle requires them to be on-screen, they quickly move into position on that frame. A common consequence of this is that characters that have physics attached to parts of their body, like hair, clothes, or in this case, breasts, will react to moving so quickly. That's why if you played any 3D games, you may have noticed, at least once in your life, parts of a character's body jerking or jiggling around for a split second after they pop up on screen on a cutscene. Now, the frequency this happens depends on multiple factors, such as the engine being used to make the game, how the devs program their physics, game optimization, and so much more. But the point is, that's most likely what happened in the OG version of this cutscene, in my opinion. Even the way it happened confirms what I suspect. They jiggled so quickly and harshly just for a brief moment, then stopped moving completely despite Eva crawling on all fours, low to the ground. Also keep in mind, MGS3 was made on Konami's proprietary game engine back then, while Delta was made with Unreal Engine 5, with nearly all assets from the original, like cutscene data, were ported into it. But since both games were made in different engines, it's possible not everything carried over perfectly due to incompatibility and needed tweaking to work properly. So even if Eva's assets were intended to jiggle like that originally, it probably just didn't carry over, and the devs probably didn't notice it since the event happened so fast. Now, I will admit, there are things I can't ignore that make my theory a little shaky. Things that I'm pretty sure you guys have either already typed in the comments or are getting ready to type in the comments. For starters, you're probably going to bring up the model viewer feature in the game as a rebuttal and point out the fact that Eva's chest clearly doesn't move in Delta like it does in the original. And you have a point there. Or you would have a point. Yes, at first glance, based on the video shared on Twitter, when rotating Eva, only her goggles move. And when playing myself, I saw it as well. But if you zoom in and look carefully, her breasts do move, but very subtly. So I can't blame you for not noticing. Those online who did notice and were skeptical of the censorship claims came to the conclusion that Delta did this to be more realistic. Interestingly, this won't be the last time skeptics online will use realism as a counter-argument against those claiming censorship. I'll get to that later. Getting back to my earlier point about Eva's breast physics, they only move if you pan or rotate the camera to the right or left, unlike the OG version where they would shake no matter what direction you moved or rotated the camera. I have no idea why that is. With that out of the way, I'm sure you're also going to point out that in the same model viewer, Eva's nipples are gone in the Delta version when you look at her in X-ray mode. This is actually true, as you can see here. They're nowhere to be found when you look at comparison footage side by side, but that can be easily explained away by the devs simply forgetting to add them when remaking everyone's character models for Delta, since the only time you could ever see her nipples is in this X-ray mode in the pause menu, in this one, only escort mission at the end of the game. Also, skeptics online theorized they were removed for realism purposes, to look more like how X-ray results look in real life. Once again, they cite realism to disprove anyone claiming censorship. If Konami devs came out and publicly admitted they intentionally made these design changes for that reason, that would put this whole debate to rest. However, as of recording this video, they have not done that. Also, I'm not a radiologist, and chances are, neither are the Twitter users posting and liking comments making these claims, so take what they said earlier with a grain of salt. Next up, Twitter users claimed the devs removed the seductive animation Eva does in the original MGS3. In the OG game, Eva could do a variety of seductive poses and animations in the survival viewer, whereas in Delta, she can't. However, the people posting this are either not aware or are being disingenuous, because Eva can still do them in Delta. According to my research, in the OG version, Eva does different animations depending on the time of day you're playing, and it worked when I tested this on the PS2 version. So I applied that to Delta, and immediately you can see Eva doing the same seductive animations as in the OG version, including new facial animations the OG version didn't even have. And finally, there's the racy background posters I talked about at the start of this video that got changed. This one actually has some weight since the devs can't easily explain this away. To be honest, after looking over this script and thinking on it some more, I chose to rewrite the rest of this section to admit I'm willing to call some of this stuff with Eva censorship. But at the same time, unless more evidence is shown, you could also argue to give the devs the benefit of the doubt and assume the missing stuff with Eva was just a simple case of negligence or inexperience working with Unreal Engine 5, rather than a deliberate act of censoring the game's sexual content. Because if it were, it wouldn't make any sense. Earlier in this video, I showed off dialogue that was watered down in the Delta version. Even though the original dialogue is still there if you play in Legacy style, most people will be playing Delta in New style. You also have to go real out your way to hear those specific codec calls, especially the one with Eva about calorie mates, so the evidence of censorship was clear in that case. But not so much for this. Yes, Eva's nipples are practically invisible in Delta's X-ray mode, even if you play in Legacy style, but if they were intentionally removed for censorship reasons, why keep other things intact like Eva's jiggle physics? As minute as it is, it's still there. The pornographic magazines, explicit cutscenes, explicit character designs, Eva's various poses she can do in the model viewer, the fact that you can get her in her bikini, or the sexy model posters I went over at the start of this video. And, as a reminder, they not only brought back the old posters, but provided updated ones as well. Now, for the background posters I spoke about earlier, it is true the sexual adjacent ones were replaced, and as I said at the start of this video, they don't appear in Legacy style either, which only makes things all the more weirder because, once again, if they wanted to censor the game of sexual content, why let the more egregious stuff slide? Because let's be honest, if I didn't make this video pointing this stuff out, would you have even known these small things were changed? At this point, it would be best if the devs at Konami just came out and explained why the inconsistent changes. Don't hold your breath that they'll do it anytime soon though. But what do you think? You agree that it's censorship, or agree with the explanations against it? Do you honestly care either way, whether it actually was censorship or not? Let me know that too. Until next time. Also, I thought Hideo Kojima was supposed to be a visionary known for his attention to detail in his games, so if he really meant for them to jiggle in the original version, that wouldn't make any sense. They shouldn't jiggle, at least not like that. Why would they when they're made out of silicone?